request a staff briefing on Substitute House Bill 1333. I believe we have Ms. Van Horn and Ms. Omley. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Desiree Onley, staff to the State Government and Tribal Relations Committees. Substitute House Bill 1333 creates a Domestic Violent Extremism Commission. As background, neither federal law or state law define domestic extremism. However, the FBI and the United States Department of Homeland Security use the term domestic violent extremism to refer to domestic terrorism threats. Those agencies define domestic violent terrorist as an individual based and operating primarily in the United States without direction or inspiration from a foreign entity or group who seeks to further political or social goals wholly or in part through unlawful acts or force of violence. In 2022, the state Office of Attorney General was appropriated $125,000 to study state and local responses to acts or potential acts of domestic terrorism. At the conclusion of the study, the Attorney General made a number of recommendations, one of which is to create a 2-year commission within the Attorney General's office with the goal of proposing specific steps to adopt and fund a comprehensive public health and community-based framework for responding to domestic violent extremism. That dovetails nicely into my next remarks, which is a summary of Substitute House Bill 1333. This bill establishes a 13-member Domestic Violent Extremism Commission within the Attorney General's office to establish a comprehensive public health and community-based framework for responding to domestic violent extremism. In addition to the members specified in my bill analysis, the Commission must extend an invitation to participate in the Commission to a representative from the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and a federally recognized tribe, and is also encouraged to extend an invitation to participate to those individuals with relevant experience. The Commission is tasked with identifying community-led and evidence-based solutions to combat disinformation and misinformation, early signs of radicalization, and develop a public health style response, evaluating any future data tracking recommendations, and evaluating legal tools and making recommendations for potential new legislation and regulations to address domestic violent extremism. The Commission must issue a report by August 30th, 2025, and includes steps to adopt and fund a public health style community-based framework for proactively responding to domestic violent extremism, steps to improve, standardize, and add transparency to data collection, and legal options available under existing law and potential new legislation to address threats of domestic violent extremism. The Commission must hold at least 4 meetings, with its first meeting to occur by December 31st, 2023, and the Commission dissolves on September 1st, 2025. And with that, I will hand it over to Jessica for a remark on fiscal impact.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Ormsby, members of the committee. For the record, Jessica Van Horn, staff to this committee. A fiscal note for the House bill is available in your EBB. The changes made under the substitute should not substantially change the fiscal impact. The Attorney General's office estimates costs of $496,000 general fund state in the 23-25 biennium and $42,000 in fiscal year 26 to support the commission. This includes 1.5 FTEs to support the commission, $24,000 per fiscal year for interpretation and transcription services, $5,000 per fiscal year for stipends for participants, and travel and meeting costs. These costs will continue through August of 2025 as the commission expires on September 1st, 2025, and the Office of the Governor assumes no fiscal impact. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you both very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Omley or Ms. Van Horn? Thank you again for the briefing. We'll now go to public testimony. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and bring forward those that are in person. Christiana De Leon, Everett Blindheim, and how about Roger Cluck? Are you here in person? Okay, so I don't, I'll just keep going for in person. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have Tim Eyman, Don Land, Anastasia Osorio. Mr. Cluck is online, so we can go to him if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Gregerson.
Waiting on her. Should I go now?
No, Mr. Cluck, when you're ready.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Kluk.
Just unmuting. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ormsby and committee members. I applaud. My name is Roger Cluck. I'm the director of a nonprofit called Projects for a Civil Society, and I'm also the North American representative to an organization called the Alternatives to Violence Project International. Colleagues of mine have helped kids leave the FARC guerrillas and have helped people leave Boko Haram. As someone who works in violence prevention and recovery, I support this commission. I'm excited by it. However, I feel that there are some voices missing, and I would like to suggest a couple of other seats for that. The first is there are many who have left this life, who call themselves former members of hate groups who have found their way back into community and beloved community. And I think they need a seat or two on the commission. Similarly, there are people who do a lot of work around prevention of joining these sorts of groups and recovery for those who've come out. And I believe there should be a seat or two for them also. People don't know what they don't know.
Fortunately, Mr. Cluck, we've run out of time. If you'd like to submit your suggestions in writing to the committee, be happy to get them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gregerson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we go to the to Tim, we're going to ask for Eric Pratt, Lori Lane, and Jennifer Heinwithy to go ahead and move from the attendees. And Tim, when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Tim Eyman from Bellevue. The McCarthy hearings of the 1950s forced regular citizens to be investigated and interrogated for their beliefs, their associations, their political views, and their friends. Some, especially in Hollywood, were jailed and blackballed from working. Now, at least the McCarthy hearings were in public. This bill empowers the AG to investigate and interrogate regular citizens, not for some illegal act, but for their views, their associations, and their friends. And this bill contains no judicial oversight, no public viewing, no TVW, which offers zero confidence that basic constitutional rights like freedom of association, freedom of expression will not be trampled. And it will all be done in private. This bill involves criminal penalties, just like McCarthy wanted. The substitute bill promises that the AG will not just target those on the right, but also those on the left. That is not an improvement. I have zero concern if people want to get together and meet with Seattle's Cashapp Sawant and plot having socialism take over. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's a point of view. They have a right to that point of view, and they shouldn't be deterred from getting together and associating with one another for fear of being investigated, interrogated, blackballed, and possibly jailed for doing so.
Thank you so much. Representative Gregerson?
Please go.
Thank you. My name is Dawn Land, and I'm asking that this committee please vote do not fund on House Bill 1333. Our state has an abundance of committees and commissions, such as the LGBTQ Commission. House Bill 1333 would create a commission that is both redundant and completely unnecessary. House Bill 1333 would establish the Domestic Violence Extremism Commission within the Office of the Attorney General. The fiscal notes of this bill state that the Attorney General's office reports that they do not have the funding for this commission within their budget. The fiscal notes also states that it is assumed the staff for this commission would be located in Seattle. I think most would agree that Seattle is the most diverse, equitable, and inclusive city in our state. I think we'd also agree that Seattle has the highest rent in our state. So locating an already unnecessary commission in the Washington state city that needs it the least and has the highest possible costs would be a grossly negligent use of taxpayer money. Please vote do not fund on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Land. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you. Before we go to Eric, let's call forward C. Davis, who should be in person, and Sherry Reisner. And then we'll go to Eric on the remote. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. So let's revisit some important lessons.
Eric, we're having
On
a
March
little trouble
13th.
hearing you. We might need you to get a little closer to your microphone.
Okay,
There we go.
hopefully I
That
still have
sounds
my
fine.
time. Okay, I'll turn off my camera. On March 13th, 1954,
You
the
identify
committee,
yourself for the record, Mr. Pratt?
my name is Eric Pratt, and I am speaking in opposition to House Bill 1333.
Thank you.
So let's revisit some important lessons. On March 13th, 1954, the Committee for State Security, or KGB, was established as a chief security agency of the Soviet Union until its breakup in 1991. Its primary purpose was to protect the state from internal and external threats by gathering intelligence, conducting counterintelligence operations, and suppressing internal dissent and any activities deemed counter-revolutionary. April 26, 1933, the Gestapo was brought into formal existence, known to be the secret police of Nazi Germany. February 8, 1950, saw the birth of the Stasi, the secret police and intelligence agency of the former East German government. Perhaps today we have a new chapter. Spring of 2023 saw the creation of DOMVEC, full name, the Domestic Violent Extremists Commission. DOMVEC, established by the Washington legislature in 2023 sessions, primary purpose of intelligence gathering and political persecution of persons and speech deemed counter to the interests of state political and special interest ideology. It is so surprising to me that we are taking
Would you
this
please summarize,
serious.
Mr. Pratt?
If enacted, this will be just a short matter of time before it's abused. I honestly don't understand why we're even talking about this. Please oppose this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lori, when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine, Ms. Lane. Go right ahead.
Great. Thanks, Chair Ormsby and committee members. My name is Laurie Lane, and I'm from Buckley, Washington, and I am speaking also in opposition to this bill, HB 1333. I have real concerns about where this bill could be going. I feel like it would be disproportionately used against anybody who has conservative views like myself. That frightens me. To have somebody sit there and decide if I'm a violent domestic extremist. I'm nothing of the sort, and a lot of people are not that believe as I do. And this is scary. This reminds me too much on the federal level of the Ministry of Truth that they tried to organize under Biden. I see this heading in a much even worse direction than that, and that's saying something. Please don't vote on this monstrosity and put it in the garbage where it belongs.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
And not
Representative
threatening us.
Gregerson?
Thank you.
Jennifer, when you're ready.
Good evening.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Heine-Withy, and I am asking for a do not fund on SHB 1333. When I read through this bill and the 2022 domestic terrorism study, I was frightened of the implications. This bill would allow the criminalization of language that is labeled misinformation or disinformation. And I ask, who will be deciding what speech is acceptable and which isn't? What is true, what is false, or what is hateful and what isn't? Last year, the Biden administration labeled parents testifying at school board meetings domestic terrorists. And in 2020, anyone who expressed apprehension of the effectiveness of masks or the COVID vaccines were accused of spreading disinformation. In both cases, I would have been labeled a domestic terrorist. The law would create a committee to track data and be judge and jury representing different ethnic and identity groups, but no protection for the rights of people of faith. Make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. And that is why 2,952 people have registered con and only 136 pro. I'm asking that you do not fund SHB 1333.
Thank you very much. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we go to C. Davis, let's go ahead and advance from the attendees list. Gary Wilson, Linda Ader, and Sue Kaufman. And Mr. Davis, when you're ready.
My name is C. Davis. I'm with Washingtonians to recall Inslee. I want to start with a confession. I'm a domestic violent extremist. But what makes me a domestic violent extremist in the context of House Bill 1333? Well, I believe that the United States is the best country ever created. I believe that all men are created equal and equal under the law. I believe that free speech is a natural right that comes from God. I believe that every American has a right to worship the God of their choosing or not to worship if they choose not to. I believe that parents have a right to raise their children in a manner that represents their values and attend school board meetings. I believe that forced medical treatment is something that can only happen in an evil society such as the Third Reich or the USSR. I believe that to protect oneself is a natural instinct inherent with all living creatures and that government has no right to interfere with a person's right to self-defense. I believe that this room is, or was, full of other domestic violent extremists, each of which is likely to have standing to challenge this bill on First Amendment grounds. This bill will cost the state of Washington millions of dollars in litigation. I ask you to vote do not pass on this corrupt bill.
Thank you. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sherry, when you're ready.
We can't quite hear you, Ms. Reisner. I'm not sure what our malfunction is.
Can you hear
There,
me?
we can hear a little bit better. Can you try and speak again? Let's see if it's coming through.
All right, up.
Yep.
Can you hear
Now
me?
we have. Yep. Now we have you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sherry Reisner. I live in Pierce County. I asked for a vote of do not fund for this bill. My primary concern I was going to say is because of the public health aspect to it. But I am very deeply concerned about all the other things that the last several speakers have spoken about. In particular, public health will be included. I urge you to vote no. The intentions are good behind this commission. My upbringing and heritage are in the Jewish community, and in fact, an extended member of my family was gunned down in the Pittsburgh synagogue a few years ago. And I'm a lifelong Democrat. However, unfortunately, a lot of things have become politicized that should not be politicized. The scope of this commission, especially if it includes health discussions between providers and patients, should absolutely be not included. We need to preserve informed consent so that multiple points of view between healthcare providers and patients can be discussed freely, and that informed consent and freedom of speech are preserved.
Thank you, Ms. Reisner. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gary, when you're ready.
Thank you, Appropriations Committee. Gary Wilson. Please do not fund SHB 1333 in this commission. This bill infringes on the right to free speech. In Washington State, the Orwellian movie 1984 can be renamed 2023 if this bill is allowed to be funded. This proposed bill sounds eerily similar to Biden's epically failed Ministry of Truth. I regularly attend my local school board meeting and speak on occasion. Based on that alone, I could be considered a domestic violent extremist by a radical left-wing committee this bill would empower. The Attorney General made it clear one group this bill targets are those who stand against Drag Queen Story Hour. I regularly go to my Fort Vancouver Library Board meeting asking that they not bring back this drag queen who came and read gender-confusing stories to 3 to 8 year olds.
Mr. Wilson, we don't allow props in committee.
Video performing sex acts on a penis coming off a school bus. This is who the Attorney General demands you support with this bill. Do you support this or the right of people to stand up for children? This bill really is a drag.
Thank you. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Linda?
Hi there, my name is Linda Ader, and I would like to ask the Appropriations Committee also to not fund this bill. I'm really concerned about what I'm seeing in this bill with regard to, it appears to me that it's meant to target conservative voices and conservative thought. We do have a First Amendment that's supposed to protect free speech, and in part, you're protecting freedom of thought and to protect the ability to exchange ideas and let people learn to critically think and decide what's a good idea, what's a bad idea. And I feel that this bill is designed to shut down conservative voices. When I saw the ADL's PowerPoint that made recommendations to the Attorney General's office, it included adding, or that conspiracy narratives could include things like being concerned about election fraud, having concerns about anti-masking or anti-COVID vaccines, or being anti-COVID vaccine in your thoughts, being against critical race theory, or promoting grooming narratives in relation to, as the gentleman was just talking about, these things like Drag Queen Story Hour. These are hardly conspiracy theories that can lead to violence. These are just things that are happening in our culture that people are talking about. There's people that are okay with these things and people that aren't, and we should all get to have our voices heard without fear of being persecuted criminally.
Thank you, Ms. Ader. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we go to Sue, let's go ahead and advance from the attendees to panelists Mike Johnson, Robert Runnels, Charlton Evans, and Paul Gloomes. And Sue, when you're ready.
Good evening.
I'm Sue Kaufman. I'm a member of Informed Choice Washington, and I'm against this bill. Bill 1333 will violate the First and Fourth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, as well as Washington State's Constitution. It is bad publicity to spend $500,000 on an unlawful effort. This bill is vague in its description of what a domestic violence extremist is, nor does it explain what misinformation or disinformation are. Will this commission decide that parents and caregivers are domestic violence extremists because they speak out at a school board meeting? Are we considered DVE because we demand that our legislators truly represent us and support our freedoms and rights? The cost of implementing and supporting this commission is unnecessary. We already have criminal and civil remedies for hate crimes and violent crimes. Please do not fund HB 1333. Our efforts to address terrorism should focus on actual criminal activity and intent to commit a crime, and not upon the people who exercise their right to freedom of expression. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mike Johnson. My comments today will reflect my opposition to HB 1333. This bill, if passed, would create an Orwellian surveillance infrastructure complete with a track and trace network that would violate both our federal Constitution under the First and Fourth Amendments and our Washington Constitution under Article 1, Section 1. The language in this bill with respect to misinformation and disinformation is not defined, and its true intent is vague at best. The fact is, crimes that constitute DVE under HB 1333 are already addressed by criminal and civil remedies for hate crimes and violent crimes, with multiple agencies, both federal and in all 50 states, that collect and analyze terrorism data, including DHS and FBI, making domestic surveillance and enforcement provisions in this bill redundant. Any attempt to write legislation preempting crime will undoubtedly be met head-on by protections that exist in our founding documents as violations, and rightfully so. This bill will not stand up to judicial scrutiny. Adjudication will cost the state untold revenue needlessly. The money will be far better spent elsewhere. I urge you to prevent AG Ferguson's HB 1333 from passing appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Robert?
Good evening.
Hello, this is Bob Runnels.
Yes,
Mr. Chair,
Runnels.
members. Yeah, I'm opposed to the type of violent acts that were cited as reason for this bill. But these acts are used as hyperbole to distract us from the proposed methods. HB 1333 must be stopped in its tracks. As admitted in the AG's own study, HB 1333 would run against constitutionally protected rights. But how can you support creation of a commission that would look for loopholes in protected rights? The first duty of the commission would be to identify ways to combat misinformation and disinformation. This requires the government to decide what is or isn't. A government cannot be trusted to define truth for the public. It would cast too wide a net. It's why freedom of speech is in the very First Amendment. So how can this go wrong? It's been disclosed in federal committee hearings this week that FBI agents are pressured to reclassify cases as DVE to meet performance metrics. So data supporting this bill must be exaggerated. The AG also found that proposed commission would get more public support if they added the word violent to the phrase. Is that a good reason to vote for it? Save the $500,000 budget request and do not pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charlton?
Good evening. My name is Charlton Evans, and I'm here to also oppose or hope that SHB 1333 is opposed. On the face of it, this appears to be paramount to a state-sponsored lynch mob. The committee is a recipe for basically combating free speech and address any signs of citizens enjoying the liberties provided by First Amendment rights. As a state-sanctioned organization, apparatus to collect a list of subjectively designated violent people that don't support the state's political agenda under the guise of public health. I'm curious about what scientific or medically based methods the state is proposing here to support public health. What objective guidelines is the community-based framework expected to apply? The committee is a recipe for witch hunting based on feelings of select groups rather than a constructive, objective tool with checks and balances. Please vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you. Before we bring forward Paul, let's go ahead and move Rebecca Faust and Richard Grunwell and Lisa Olson and Liv Fenn. And Paul, when you're ready.
I see Richard and Lisa.
No, Paul.
I don't see Paul in the...
Okay, let's move on from Paul and go with Richard.
Mr. Grunwald, could you proceed, followed by Ms. Olson?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Chair Ormsby and committee. My name is Richard Grunwald from the 9th Legislative District. Thank you for this opportunity to testify to do not fund HB 1333. As a citizen of this state and our country known for our constitutional rights to free speech, I'm alarmed at how much government is being weaponized to subdue free speech when that speech questions the narrative of the majority party. For example, some parents who have exercised their free speech before school boards across the country have been accused of being domestic terrorists. Also, those who have had honest questions about election integrity have systematically been categorized by the media and sections of government as spreading misinformation. We can't stand for this. We must be very careful to protect our rights of free speech. This bill is unnecessary and threatens those rights. We already have laws and provisions that protect us against violence. Thanks again for the opportunity to testify in opposition to this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Grunwald. Ms. Olson, followed by Rebecca. I think you need to turn your microphone on, Ms. Olson.
Oh, there we go. All right. My name is Lisa Olson. I am in opposition of this bill. I urge you to not fund it. Please reject it immediately. This appears to be a bill that will be one-sided for who's it going to target. How do you define violent extremism? I have my children in private school. I put them in public school 1 year. And from the discoveries of having my children in public school and what was going on and what they were being taught, I became active in attending school board meetings. The current presidential administration has voiced that parents that go to school board meetings are domestic terrorists. Is that a violent extremist? Domestic violent extremist? My point is that these definitions could go any direction the person using them wants to take them. I urge you to allow parents to have a voice and a say in their children's education, work together, and reject this bill to save democracy. My voice, my choice. Let us parents speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olson. Representative Gregerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's go ahead and advance Brad Payne, Leslie Williams, Tamborine Borelli, Robert Wardell, and Lloyd Bender. And Rebecca, when you're ready.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Faust, testifying today in opposition to the 1333. I think there's two major issues, constitutional issues even, with the bill. One is First Amendment expressive and associative freedom. Number two is equal protection and a related establishment clause concern, which I'll get to in a minute. Of course, the government should prohibit violent acts. These are generally crimes. But when you start talking about misinformation, disinformation, and so forth, that's not a crime. In fact, that includes speech, constitutionally protected speech, which the government has no business sticking a threatening nose, or in my opinion, even an inquisitive nose into. Whether it's bad or good speech, it's a free country. Sorry, not sorry. It's not your business as a government to ask me as a citizen if I've ever been a member of the Communist Party or whatever the villain of the day is. Know your place. If you're confused about the government's role, read the Supreme Court's opinion in Brandenburg versus Ohio. To my second point, equal protection, this bill awards committee representation based on race, but not all races are awarded a representative seat on the committee. This is a violation of equal protection. Similarly, some religions are specifically given representation on this government committee. Many other religions are not. This is a violation of the anti-establishment clause of the First Amendment. I hope we can agree racism and violence are problems, but this bill is not a solution. It's an unconstitutional mess. Please do not advance it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Faust. Representative Gregerson.
Brad, please.
Good evening, Mr. Payne.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brad Payne. I'm the Policy Director for the Family Policy Institute of Washington, and I'm opposed to the funding of 1333. I'm also one of 2,950 that are opposed to this bill this evening. This bill seeks to divide the citizens rather than to heal our divisions. The lack of oversight in this bill is very concerning, and it's purposely vague, I believe, in its key definitions of extremism. On the commission itself, there is a glaring exclusivity of a Christian representative, and I believe and would suggest that we spend the $500,000 that's earmarked to apprehend and prosecute those who did take over our streets in Seattle and Olympia with real acts of violent extremism, and have also attacked the pregnancy resource centers and churches throughout our state over the last several months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Leslie?
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for allowing me to testify today. My name is Leslie Williams, and I am testifying today not only on behalf of conservative ladies of Washington, but also on behalf of every concerned Washingtonian. We don't want government to become a weapon against our citizens. The very premise of Attorney General reports cites FBI statistics that were potentially flawed. Representative Jim Jordan has a 1,000-page report available, which goes into the FBI leadership and their direction to inflate cases. Another critical problem with this bill is that it relies on the use of an expert attached to the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center created their own list of people they considered to be extremists. This list was used by a domestic violent extremist mass shooter to target innocent people. It is highly inappropriate for a government to create their own list of citizens that could be used in retribution in any way. Whistleblowers from the FBI have been reporting to the Congressional Weaponization of Government Task Force, and startling revelations are coming forward. It is premature for this bill to go forward. While these shocking allegations are coming out of our own government, perhaps the best use of this committee's time and this bill could be create our own weaponization of state government task force to investigate our own flaws. Please vote, do not fund on this bill, SHB 1333.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tambourine Borelli, I make sure that they are brought forward here. Tambourine Borelli, Robert Wardell, and Lloyd Bender. And Tambourine, when you're ready.
Good evening.
Thank you, Tambourine. Good evening. I'm pleased to see that today there is an overwhelming 3,400 people in opposition to HB 1333, just as there was at the initial hearing where there was 2,499 who opposed this in relation to 104 who supported it. The opposition was not from white supremacists seeking to protect their hate speech, as the AG's office would like you to believe. The opposition then, as it is today, is from everyday people on the left and right who recognize that this bill's true purpose is, and that's to intimidate, to silence any dissenting voices who oppose the official narrative on guns, parents' rights to protect their children, or those who see through our fatal flaws of our current election system, like myself, who the AG already tweeted that organizations like mine need to be held, quote, accountable for spreading disinformation, which is disinformation in itself. The fact that this bill was passed to committee despite having such loud opposition should really tell everyone just how upside down the relationship between the people and their elected servants are. In closing, the people are waking up, and we will not allow this Orwellian Ministry of Truth Commission to obliterate our First Amendment to speak the truth in the face of tyranny. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Borelli. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lloyd?
And I think we'd like to try once again to get Robert Wardell, if you're in the waiting room there, Mr. Wardell, I'd like to have you transition over into the Zoom room. There we go. Okay, Rep. Gregerson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Lloyd, please proceed.
Yes, my name is Lloyd Bender, and I'm against this. Our Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution says that this government was established to protect and maintain individual rights. This bill violates those rights. The second, Section 2 of Article 1, the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution does not allow state government to violate or infringe or impair our rights. We don't have to ask permission from any government entity to use our rights or not use our rights. Section 4 of our state constitution protects the freedom to assemble. Government doesn't get to choose with who we assemble or what groups we associate with. Section 5 of our state constitution protects the freedom of speech with no limits on the people. Government doesn't get to dictate how our free speech is. The First Amendment protects both our free speech and our freedom to assemble with no limits on the people. It only limits government. Section 7 of our state constitution, invasion of private affairs, and the Fourth Amendment, the person, place, and papers were secure in those aspects.
Please summarize, Mr. Bender. Unfortunately, you're out of time.
I know,
if you please summarize.
I'm doing that. But in summary, finally, Section 29 of the state constitution makes it mandatory that the provisions in this constitution are mandatory, that the state follow the constitutional in Article 1.
Thank you, Mr. Bender.
True.
Representative Gregerson?
Wow, I didn't get my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jesus.
We're going to go with the last speaker tonight, Robert.
Really? 4 hours we waited? Are you serious? We waited 4 hours?
Ma'am.
And you're just going to like
Everybody that testified today was given 1 minute because we've been at it for 4 hours and we needed to get through.
Talking about HB 1333, the people I was timing it, they were getting 2 and 2.5 minutes. You said that they were only going to get a minute, but you gave them longer, and then you started bringing it down on us.
No, that may be your perception, ma'am, but we're going to continue on until the conclusion of this hearing. Representative Gregerson.
So we still have testifier Robert Wardell on Zoom.
Good evening. Mr. Wardell?
Yes, evening. My name is Robert McDowell Wardell. As a self-advocate, I'm worried if we go through this bill, how would you protect people with persons with disabilities and other people? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wardell. Do we have anyone else in the Zoom area that wish to testify? Is that?
Not that we know of. There may be, there's no one else that we have that has signed up to testify, whether it's online or in person. So there may be.
Did you, and your
Okay,
name?
please come forward.
Okay. Did you sign up to the?
Through your link.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Carrie French. I'm in the 33rd Legislative District. HB 1333 is the most disturbing bill next to all the gun-grabbing bills I have ever seen come out of this body. As Patrick Henry said, I know of no way of judging the future but by the past. And in human history, the most heinous genocides begin with the label lynching of groups of people. The Salem witch hunt, the Mao's Cultural Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Nazis, all labeled people, whole groups of people without due process. This bill seeks to do the same, only this time it's whites, conservatives, Christians, and any others that don't go with the government narrative. Not by their actions, but by their views. This is appalling, unconstitutional, un-American, and wrong. This is profiling in the worst way. The Attorney General already has an office, a hate crimes advisory work group established by RCW 43.10.30, and this would presumably do the same thing. So HB 1333 is completely unnecessary and a waste of time. I urge a no vote on this unconstitutional, disgusting bill.
Thank you, Ms. French. And I don't think we had a record of you signing up. If you wouldn't mind checking in with the staff table just so they can just get you as signed up and testifying. Thank you. Is there anybody else present that had wished to testify, did not have an opportunity? Well,
if I didn't sign up?
We need folks to sign up ahead of time, an hour before, just so we can gauge the pace of the committee hearing. Thanks for your understanding. So that will conclude. Oh, but we do encourage folks to submit written testimony. It won't be part of the, okay, it won't be part of the bill report because the bill report is what happens in committee, but it will be part of the official record on any bill you wish to comment on. So that will conclude the public testimony and the public hearing on substitute House Bill 1333. At the conclusion, at the point of adjournment here this evening, the Democrats will be caucusing in B 1518 and being no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.